Welcome back to what will be kind of our last normal homeschool connection night for the year, because Mays are all kind of mixed up, and we'll talk about that at the end. But tonight's goals are to review the benchmark and to review the stuff about whole numbers, which that's what we started the year with. So we're kind of ending with you guys what we started with. So it's kind of come full circle at this point. As always, it's going to help you to guide your student as they get different math tests, reviewing old math tests, getting them ready for the tests, the SOLs, which are rapidly approaching about a month from now. Getting them to recognize their mistakes, so hopefully they don't make those in the future. Notes are always provided, general concepts, test questions. Feel free to see me afterwards. So we'll start with the benchmark. I was very pleased with the benchmark. If we look, not a whole lot of red, which is what I like to see when I'm clicking on that. The things, they did very well with fractions. You see question number 1, everybody got that one right. They had to identify a fraction, and the entire class got that right. 2 and 3 were also identifying fractions, 95%. I really can't ask for a better results than that. They did really well with a lot of the geometry questions as well. We see a lot of the geometries are yellow or white, which are the good colors to see. We see with, I was very impressed with the adding decimals one, which we haven't really reviewed decimals since we did decimals in first advisory. So I was kind of taking a gamble on not really reviewing that. 91% of the class got that right, which is incredible. That means I really stuck with them, working with them at home, all that kind of stuff that always helping. The thing that I see tripped them up most were equivalent fractions when they were given a picture. What I mean by that is it would say, trying to think, it had 4 candles, and 2 of them were blown out and 2 were still lit. And then it said which picture is equivalent to the candles. So there was 2/4 was the candles, and there were a bunch of them that were unshaded. If you're trying to look at your students' work, that was question 4. You can kind of see their thought process. What they should have done was identify 2/4 as their as the candles, and then looked at each fraction bar to see what it was, and then just done the cross multiplication thing. That occurred again in question 10, I believe, and forget what other one. They know how to compare equivalent fractions and compare fractions because they know the butterfly method. Throwing in the picture kind of tripped them up a little bit. So while you're working with your student at home, if they come to that question, which they might see that kind of thing on, I think it's like Q5, they might see questions like that on IXL. You just tell them, don't even worry about the picture. Just use the picture to figure out what fraction it is, and then do your work like that. Just pretend after you figured out what fraction it is, just don't worry about the picture. A big common complaint I heard from the students was that it said 2/4, but then none of the pictures given were at a fourths. So they got really hung up on the fourths thing, and they couldn't move on from there. So some of them either made a guess or they did it correctly. The majority of the class, the majority of the class got it wrong, but some did get it correct. So just make sure that they recognize that the pictures in a fraction you can turn into numbers. Do you have a question?
What should be the fraction?
I don't remember offhand. Yeah, I don't remember the question offhand. There were, it should have been 5/10.
5/10.
I think everything was out of tenths. So there was 2/4, which is equivalent to 5/10, or 1/2, but 1/2 wasn't provided. The other thing that kind of tripped them up were word problems. We see there weren't a whole lot of word problems on this benchmark. The last couple ones were word problems. Very awkwardly word problems, I will say that. For number 31, it gave this real long convoluted thing. It was like Susie was trying to figure out the greatest common factor of 4 and 16, and she made this chart and gave the chart. Based on this chart, what can you know the greatest common factor of 4 is? It was basically a paragraph they had to read when all that they were asking was, what's the greatest common factor of 4 and 16? But that's what we'll do that, and it'll go in a very roundabout way. That's a very simple question. So if I don't have paper copies to send home with you because we did them on the Chromebooks, but if you just, as you're working through, I'm going to show you what on IXL is going to be a really good resource for practicing word problems. Just help them kind of sift through the extra information that's not really important, because that question, it's it's kind of pointless. Like, why give all that information when at the end all you're asking is what's the greatest common factor of 4 and 6 and or 4 and 16, and the vast majority of them know how to do greatest common factor. As other things that kind of jumped out at me, the number 30, again, very convoluted word problem. It said Larry had a chocolate bar and he wanted to split it with his friend, and it showed like a picture of Hershey's chocolate bar, which has 12 little rectangles within the large rectangle, and it said how much would each person get. And so if they counted up, a lot of them counted up and they found out that each one gets 6/12. 6/12 wasn't an answer, it was 1/2, because that's the reduced form of 6/12. But a lot of them were like, I couldn't find 6/12 on there. And I said, if only we had some way of reducing fractions that was like a birthday cake method. I couldn't say that during the test, but that's what I wanted to say to them. But again, kind of a convoluted way to ask, if you broke this into 2 pieces, how would it be? And number 32, as we were talking about that, is we actually had a meeting with our team today to review all the different benchmarks. And we kind of came to the consensus that 32 isn't necessarily the most valid of a question. That's kind of based on some of the old SOLs. It said like, Susie has a garden, 1/2 of them are tulips, 1/6 of them are roses. How many tulips and roses are together? And I think it said she had 12 flowers to start. So it was kind of a roundabout way to figure that out. We didn't really come to a consensus as a team if that's going to be something that they'll see on the SOL or not. But that's kind of a similar way of the problem that was on one of the fractions tests where it's like, or it was on the homework where it said Mr. B had like a gallon of lemonade and he drank, or bag of cereal, I forget what I used. And one day I ate that much, I might have spilled some and I might have given some away. So it kind of, they had to, rather than thinking of it as 12 flowers, they had to think of it as one whole garden to start and then convert it into fractions and then convert it back into 12s. Not quite sure if they're going to see something on the SOL. Be a good challenge question to give them. If you want to write down the numbers, it was 12 flowers, 1/6 of them were tulips, 1/2 of them were daisies, and it wanted how much tulips and daisies put together.
Can you say that
Yeah.
again?
12 flowers total. 1/2 of them were tulips, I think, and 1/6 of them were daisies. And then they want the total amount of tulips and daisies. And if memory serves, I think it works out to be 8. But yeah, it would be 8. But overall, significantly better than the last benchmark. You keep in mind the last benchmark, I think the class average was somewhere in the 50s or 60s, but that's also because we hadn't finished long division. This was a benchmark that Mr. B actually got all the stuff taught in time. So overall, pretty good. So the other thing, last thing before we move on to whole numbers that I really want to point out is this patterns thing. It's not necessarily that the students don't know how to do the patterns, because patterns is a skill that they're very good on, because that's been a skill that's been reinforced often since preschool or kindergarten. The thing that will trip them up 9 chances out of 10 is that it will give them 4 figures and it will want the 6th figure. They will find out the 5th figure, which will be one of the answers, and they'll do that. They need to know that if it gives, for instance, if it gives 4 figures, 1, 2, 3, 4, but it asks for the 6th, what they should do is draw 2 spaces, the 5 and the 6, figure out what would be at 5 and figure out what would be at 6. That's just kind of a rushing mistake, not reading the word problem completely to make sure that they are asking what the questions are, because I would be very willing to bet that A was what the 5th figure would be, and C might have been the reverse if they would have subtracted instead of added. So they do need to recognize that a lot of times if it's asking a pattern, it's not going to ask them a straightforward question really like, what would be the next thing in this pattern? It's going to be asked, what's the next thing? So, and it's going to make sure that they do that. I'm trying to think, where was the other? There was 2 pattern ones on here. I forget. There were 2 pattern ones. I think they did do better on the 2nd pattern one. I just can't find it right off the top of my head. But overall, like I said, much better. So we will move on to whole numbers and place value next. So whole numbers are pretty much any number to the left of the decimal. 2 weeks ago when we were here, we were on the right side of the decimal. We go through the millions place value. So this is basically what we had last week. We worked on the blue, or last week. We worked on the blue stuff with the tenths, the hundreds, and thousands, so that's what we worked on last time. Whole numbers are everything on that side. We talked about the ones period, which is everything from the decimal to the first comma, the thousands period, which is in between these two commas, and the millions period. We only go to the framework for the SOL officially says go to the 1 millions. I did extend it out while I was teaching to the 100 millions because it's teaching the same pattern. Because each pattern has a ones, a tens, and hundreds, and then jumps to the next period. So we have ones, tens, thousands. So this is technically 1,000, 10,000s, 100,000. So then this is technically 1 millions, 10 millions, 100 millions. I think last year I extended it all the way to billions just because I just want to see how far we can take it. Because it's really repeating the pattern over and over and over. It's just the period name changes each time. So what they will have to do is they'll have to read, write, and identify it in a couple of different ways, very similar to in decimals. You will notice that this presentation is going to look a whole heck of a lot similar to the decimal one because, I'll be completely honest with you, when I was making this last night, I pretty much just took the decimal one and changed all the decimal points to commas because that's how linked the standards with the decimal points or with the whole numbers and the decimals are, which is really nice for me because it normally takes me like an hour and a half, 2 hours to make one of these presentations. Last night it only took me like half an hour because I just had to change things. So standard form is one way they will see it. That's just in numbers. Written form is another way that they will see it. What I tell them when it's given it in standard form and they have to identify the written form, if you see a comma in the standard form, I better see a comma in the written form and vice versa. With whole numbers, I better not see the word and anywhere in there because and signifies that there's a decimal point. So I make this big deal out of it if they are trying to read something. So for instance, if they said 3,350,000 and 215, I'd be like, you don't say and unless the decimal point. They kind of pick up on it by now, but it kind of becomes a big joke at the end. So the only reason I would see and in written form is if there was a decimal point and something to the right. Expanded form is still that same thing I talked about. I remember 2 weeks ago I said I would say more than likely they wouldn't see expanded form with decimals. They will see expanded form with whole numbers. So it's the same thing. The 3 is in the millions place value. The second 3 is in the 100 millions. 5 is in the 10,000s. I skipped the 0. Sometimes the student will write the 0. They don't have to. The SOL will most likely omit the 0 because technically speaking, there's nothing in that place value. I skipped it. When they're writing it out themselves, I don't mark it wrong if they did include it, but they're most likely not going to see it. The 2 is in the hundreds place value. The 1 is in the tens place value, and the 5 is in the 5 place, or the ones place value. The other way that they're going to see this is it will say, what is the value of the 5? That's a poor example because there's 2 5s there. What is the example of the 2? So they would have to not only find the place value it's in, but they would have to know it's in the 2. It's in the hundreds place value, and there's 2 of them, so it's worth 200. So that's another way that they will see it. They don't traditionally struggle too much with that, as long as they identify the place values. When we are starting, whole number place value is one of the very first things I do, is pretty much this chart with them. I just put up a bunch of blank spaces, and I have all of these on the smartboard, and I just have them all mixed up, and I just have kids come up one at a time and just kind of drag it around and basically complete the chart. So it's a really quick and easy way for them to remember. I even go a step further and I color code it per period so that they know, like all the black ones are supposed to be together, all the green ones, all the blue ones, all the red ones. Kind of the opposite of integration, what we were talking about in social studies. So this, as I was going through the release items and the practice items, this was the only question I could find related to place value. And it's place value chart that we saw with decimals. This one just doesn't have decimals. So it says the 0, they would have to drag the 0 is in the 10,000s place. The 1 is in the tens place. The 2 is in the hundreds place. The 5 is in the ones place. Or skip the 4 also. 4 is in the thousands place. The other way that they could see that is it could say what's the value of the 4. And so they would have to not only see that it is in the thousands place, but they would need to know that there are 4 in the thousands place. So that's, the value is 4,000. I don't really think it would go as far as saying what's the value of the 4 and then put 1,000. It could, because that would be a good way to trick them because it is in the thousands place. But like I said, this whole number thing, identifying the place values isn't a big struggle because the only difference between 3rd grade and 4th grade in regards to place value is 3rd grade only goes to the 100,000s, and we add just one more place value. So they've been working with place values. That's one of the most basic skills in math that everything kind of builds from. So this part is not really where they struggle with. Nor is this part, the rounding. Like I said, literally the exact same slide from last week. I just changed, there was a decimal point there last time and I just deleted it, added a comma. So it's rounding. The first step is to find the place, look next door, 5 or above, give it a shove, 4 below, you're good to go. All digits on the front stay the same, all digits behind, 0 is your name. Again, there's their little we will round you video. I'm just gonna go quickly do a model on the smartboard just so as you're reviewing these for SOLs, there's a work example for you. So, all right. So for, I said 21,899, and I want to round to the thousands place. So my first step is to find the thousands place because it's right there. I underline that. The next step is to look next door. So I circle that. The 8 tells my 1 to bump up to a 2. All digits in front stay the same. All digits behind, 0 is your name. As long as they can remember that rhyme, they're not going to really mix up rounding because rounding stays consistent. The same rules for rounding stay consistent between whole numbers and decimals. So it kind of gets stressed pretty much the whole first advisory because we're hitting it with whole numbers, then we're hitting it again with decimals. The biggest thing that they will run into the problems, I think, are on the next slide. On the next slide. So this says what is 7,613,542 rounded to the nearest 10,000. So first they would have to identify the 10,000s place. That's where they're going to make their mistake. It's probably not going to be the mistake of how to round. It's going to be identifying the place values because you see everything here, with the exception of D, is rounded correctly. It's just rounded to different place values. For instance, this one was rounded to the 100,000s. This one is correctly rounded to the 10,000s. This one is correctly rounded to the thousands, and this one is incorrectly rounded to the 10,000s. So two were rounded to the 10,000s, one was rounded correctly. The flip side of that is it will say which of the following numbers could be rounded to, I don't know, 80. And I'll have 79, 73, 82, and 86. Then maybe that's one that they can choose more than one answer. So they would have to round each of those. That's probably where they're going to make their mistake, is not rounding all the answers, which I think is coming up at the end there. Whole numbers comparing with, again, very similar to decimals. The big difference with comparing whole numbers and decimals is for whole numbers, they only have to compare the numbers to see which one is larger. With decimals, they did also have to put them in order. With fractions, they have to put them in order. But in 4th grade, officially, according to the state, they don't need to put the numbers in order. So that's kind of a lower level skill. They just need to review comparing. So 2-step method. First step is they just stack them on top of each other by matching up the place values. With decimals, I told them to line up the decimal. Here, they could line up the commas if they wanted, or I just told them to line up the place value. So if there's one, they kind of arrange them correctly. And then the next thing that they would have to do is compare by looking at each place value. So they would circle the first, the greatest place value. They see the 4s are the same. They would move on. They circle the next ones. They see the 1 is bigger. They don't need to go any further. So then they would just put in their alligator, Pac-Man, whatever their little thing to remember is to properly compare them. Quickly, again, just going to model one on the smartboard. So we would stack them. So it would be 78,888. And then I kind of work backwards from there. So I have the first number written, and then I kind of work backwards. Sometimes it works, sometimes it confuses kids more. I just like to give them a couple different strategies. So the 1 is in the 1's place value, the 9, the 8, comma, the other 8, and the 7. So you see that kind of lines up the place values for them rather than kind of guessing where it goes. That gets, especially if they have like 2 1s that are in the millions, or maybe one's in the millions and one's in just in the thousands period. This working backwards kind of helps them a little bit more. Also does have the ability to kind of confuse them, like if they remember, like, oh, now they might start writing like the 7, 8, and work backwards. It's kind of finding what works best for your child. But so then from there, they circle. They see the 7s are the same, so they circle. They see the 8s are the same, and they circle. They see the 8s are the same. They circle, and they see the 9 is that, so they don't even have to go any further. So they would put that in. The big thing that might mix them up is circling in the wrong order. So they're supposed to start over here, but if they start here, that's going to mix them up because it's going to see that 8 is bigger than 1, but it doesn't matter. That's only like having $1. You want to compare all the other dollars because I'd much rather start with the $10,000 than start with the $1. I will be taking a collection if we want to make that a real thing. But so that's, they just need to make sure they're going from left to right rather than right to left. I missed it. Okay, so this is comparing whole number examples. I like this question because it's a little bit, it makes them think a little bit more than just kind of stacking the numbers. It says which digit can be placed in the box to make this statement true. So they would still kind of have to stack the numbers here. They would just put a line where that box is. So they would see that the 2s are the same. They would see that their goal is to make the number equal. So they would have to figure out what digit is in that place value and just pretty much mimic it. So it's a 4 there. But it's another way to compare, but it's just kind of presented in a different format. Which statement is true? By and large, what's going to trip them up with this is not wanting to do a comparison 4 times. Stack the numbers, circle all those numbers. They, need to get the mentality that math isn't going to be a quick thing, especially for the SOLs. Some math, as they practice math, they will get quicker and quicker and quicker. But sometimes it gets a little tedious, like proving their work. I know some students last year and this year can kind of look at 2 numbers, like 2 fractions, tell me what the LCM is off the top of their head, and which is great. So I tell them, I was like, okay, cool, write down the LCM and just quickly write down how you would find it. Just kind of prove to me that what the LCM is. So the thing is, especially with LCM, kind of to get back into fractions a little bit, with LCM, a lot of times the students will look at 2 numbers and find a common multiple, but not the least common multiple, which then it's okay to use common multiple, but it just makes reducing easier later on if you use the least common multiple. So for instance, like 6 and 4, students look at it and quickly are like, oh, I know they have 24 in common, which is true. But lower than that they have in common is a 12. So I just tell them that if they want to go for 24, go ahead, write that down, show me your work, and then hopefully that will clue them in and they'll find the 12. So same thing with this, they might be able to look at these and see which one is correctly compared, which is bottom. No. See, I can't even do that with that. The B, so they still need to get in the habit of, working that out. And you can feel free to show that example to them that it took me a couple seconds just in my head to figure it out. And you can even show that I wasn't doing my work and I made a mistake in the first time because, well, Mr. B is 98% perfect. There's still a 2% margin of error. So the biggest problem there is going to be not actually just comparing all of them because pretty much it's a foolproof way as long as they're comparing and circling, as long as they know their numbers, which every 4th grader does. It's not going to trip them up too much. So common mistakes with all that stuff I just talked on is going to be identifying the place value wrong. That's going to affect them with the place value chart. It's going to affect them with rounding because if they don't know their place values from the start, then they can't round to the proper place value. They just need to make sure that they are identifying their place values. Second thing is what I was just talking about, not rounding all choices or alternatively rounding to the wrong place value. If they round to the wrong place value, it doesn't matter how well they rounded because they might be able to round it correctly, but they might just round to the wrong place value. So everything kind of builds from that very, very first slide we talked about. Or not lining up the place values correctly when they're comparing numbers to make sure that they, with maybe working backwards, they didn't line up correctly, or they might have it offset somewhere. So that's their common mistakes. So a couple of different ways to practice this is IXL-A. The very, very first thing on IXL is all about number sense, which is basically everything I just talked about there. It's going to cover everything from just place value to comparing to, it might even throw in some ordering, it'll throw in some rounding, but IXLA is going to be a good way to kind of just practice that skill. IXLA is also going to be a really good way to just review, like use as a warm-up, because it's really place. This kind of stuff doesn't challenge them too much, so it'll be a good way to start any review set, any session. Like maybe if they're struggling with the lapse time or something, they need to work on the lapse time. You might want to start them with IXLA because that'll give them, it'll start them with a good feeling, a nice success. So I'm saying maybe 5 minutes, start with A, and then move on to whatever they need to work on. Don't spend 15 minutes, because then they'll start getting fatigued that they've used 15 minutes. Even though it's an easy skill, 15 minutes is a long time for kids sometimes. Even for me.
You mentioned something about Q reviewing. IXLQ.
Yeah, IXLQ is fractions.
Fractions.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll show you guys at the end. I did just send home a letter. I don't know if I went home tonight or yesterday, but I listed out all the different IXLs and which ones you should be working on at home, and I'll go through that. I will put this right here so I don't forget about it. The other thing is egg carton. You can really use that. You can use a normal egg carton or a giant one. So you just use a Sharpie to put in commas. So you put one like here and here. If you need to be one longer to have a million, so you could even just go outside the egg carton, place down numbers, ask them what's the place value and the value, kind of have them recreate one of those place value charts that I showed you earlier, and I showed you, I believe, with the decimals. And so then ask them what's the value of the 6, what's the value of the 7, what place value is the 8 in. Just kind of, it's a good way. It's kind of all self-contained. You can take it in the car, that kind of stuff. But egg carton, that's one way that we really practice place value. You can also use it for rounding. You can give them the number after they've done their place value chart. Say, okay, now round it to the Are you guys still alive? Okay. What was my train of thought? Use an egg carton is the big takeaway. The next thing is going to be adding and subtracting whole numbers, which is things that follows the same rules as adding and subtracting decimals. So they need to, again, line up the place values by stacking them on top of each other. They need to add or subtract and check with the reverse operation. As long as they're checking with the reverse operation, they're checking correctly. Really no way to get an adding and subtracting question wrong, because if this doesn't match that, they know they went wrong somewhere. And like I said 2 weeks ago, the big thing is getting them to go back and redoing it. Because I try to stress the students that, don't accept just being wrong, fix it. And sometimes that gets a little overwhelming because they might get frustrated, because if they're adding and subtracting all the way up to millions, that's 7 digits. They just subtract across 7 digits they just added. And if they made a mistake, that means that's 7 digits they have to go and do again. So the goal obviously is to get it right on the first try. And then the second goal, if they don't get it right on the first try, is to just go back and redo it. One thing I like to point out to the students as they're arguing with me about not going back and redoing the work, I look at the clock and say, in that time we've just been arguing, you could have redone it. And so you can kind of present it in that way. I do that all the time. I say that to the students, like, you could have just had the work done, or you're spending more time making excuses, or I just tell them they're making excuses and they need to make changes. I say that a lot. I actually said that to my girlfriend over the weekend. She was not very happy with me. I said that, but that's another story. So I'll model one of these really quickly. Oh, they will also have word problems. I will go over word problems a little bit more extensively. A couple slides from now. All right, so we have 4,700 minus 2,578. So one thing I like to do with them, if I'm modeling something up on the board, I'll say, well, I can't take 8 away from 0, so I'll just take 0 from 8. And they'll be like, no, Mr. B, you can't do that. And then every time they do that, I want to be like, then why do you? So not all of them do that, but it's funny that how quick they are to correct my mistakes. But I want to correct your own mistakes first. Worry about me, because 98%. All right, so they can't, so they would have to cross that out, keep going. They borrow from there, that becomes a 10. 9. Some of the students, it depends how they're taught in younger grades. Some students might skip that 10 and just go right to the 9. I'm okay with either way. I know different teachers have taught it different ways that they know if you're subtracting cross arrows. Eventually, most of them are going to become 9. Some students do show, or some teachers do show the 10 and then turn it into a 9. It's all up to the teacher below me, and so I kind of just roll with what they're comfortable with. So then they do that, and that, and that, and that. And then the next step is to just take the bottom 2 numbers, kind of stack them on top of each other and do the reverse operation. So plus 2, 1, 1, 1, comma, I hope 1, 1. So handwriting, very important as well. So then they check, that matches that matches that, and that matches that. So once you have the 6 check marks, you're good, you can move on. If they're missing a check mark, they should go back and redo it, especially if they have a multi-step problem, they need to check each step as along the way, because if it's like they had to add something and then subtract something, if they make a mistake up here, it's going to affect down here. So they need to, check as they go along. That's kind of the big takeaway from this. The other part of adding and subtracting whole numbers that they didn't have with decimals, that they do have with whole numbers, it's estimating, and that's really just a fancy way of saying round first and then add or subtract. They will also have estimating with multiplication and division, but the same concept still applies. Round first and then add or subtract. Sometimes you can kind of squeak by doing the exact one and then just rounding that at the end. Doesn't always work out perfectly. Sometimes they can squeak by. They just need to know that there's rounding involved and adding and subtracting. So the other big thing is they need to round to the same place. For instance, this has a thousands place, but this does not have a thousands place. So they can't round this. They can't round that one to the thousands place and then round that one to the hundreds place, because that's rounding to 2 different systems and doesn't work that way. So if it says the greatest place, they have to see that the hundreds place is the greatest place in that one, so it's going to have to be on that one. They would follow the same rounding skills, which I modeled there, and they would round those at them. I tell them they should still, check with the reverse operation, but they should also check the exact operation, because if they check the exact operation and they're pretty close, because estimating is kind of a way to get a roundabout figure, it's pretty close. I mean, those are only 26 apart. They know they're probably right on the ball. If they would have checked the exact and it was like 4,000 off, they went wrong somewhere, either with the estimating, and I would tell you with the estimating, they probably rounded them to 2 different places if they were a couple thousand off. Because if I would have rounded that to the thousands place rather than the hundreds place, I would have been 400 off from each other, which is kind of a big amount. 26 isn't a huge, especially with estimating, to be off by, but 400 is a rather large figure to be off by. So to model that. So I just said estimate those 2 numbers. Because it just says estimate, a lot of times it will give them a specific figure, but estimate, they'll give them it gives them a little bit more leeway. Some students find it easy to estimate just down to the 10. It's kind of up to their discretion. If it just says estimate, if there was a test and I just said estimate, I would accept any answer as long as they were both rounded the same place, and then they actually did the computation correctly. It just depends on exactly how the word problem is worded. So I'll just choose the thousands place. So I would find my place, look next door, 7's above 5. So find my place, look next door. So then I would still have to do that. 5,000 plus 1,000 is 6,000. Write that like that. They would have to line it up, but I would like to finish on that for once. So 4,789 plus 1,236, adding it. So wow, I was 26 off last time. I was 25 off this time. So pretty close. That's why they need to do exact, because then that'll show them how close they are. if they rounded to the smaller place value that they round to, the smaller margin of error they're going to have. So for instance, if we had like all the way up to millions and they rounded to the millions place, they might be, you know, a million off from the exact answer, which is kind of okay because that's what they rounded to. If they rounded both to the tenths place and they're off by a million, then they did something wrong and they need to. It's gonna, the margin of error is gonna be really dependent on what place value they do choose to round to. So that is estimation, pretty straightforward. Just make sure they round and they check with the exact figure at the end. So a couple examples here, and then I'll talk a little bit more on word problems. We'll start with the most basic one, the one up here in the corner. It says, what is the difference between 3,240 and 578? So they need to clue in A first, that difference means subtract, and then they would just need to set that up. These other two are a little bit more high-level advanced questions. Still fourth grade appropriate, but they are both multi-step questions, which is where we'll kind of throw them off. So this one says, Mr. Gary's class has a goal of selling 500 pizzas in 3 months. The class sold 135 pizzas in the first month and 257 pizzas in the second month. Exactly how much more pizzas does the class need to sell to reach its goal? So a couple of different ways they could attack that problem. They know 500 is the goal. The way I would personally do it, and I find is easier, if they would add how much they've already sold and then subtract that total from the 500. So that's going to be a multi-step problem, because they would have to add those two, they would have to check those two to make sure they have the right figure, and then subtract it from 500 and then check that. So in total, they're going to have 4 operations. They're going to have the adding the two amount of pizzas they've already sold, and then the subtraction to check. They're going to have subtracting from the amount that they've sold and the total, and then the adding to check. The other way that they could do this, which is also perfectly, will get them to the same answer, is start with the 500 pizzas, subtract the 135 pizzas, and then check that, and then take that and subtract whatever was left over from the 257. I think that says 257. Yeah, 257. Either way, they're going to arrive at the same answer, but they do need to realize that it's going to be a multi-step problem. They are going to have a total of 4 problems within that one problem because they have to check. So if we look at it, the A is if they would have just added the 2 pizzas. B would have been if they added the 2 pizzas and made a mistake there. C would be if they subtracted the pizzas, or they added and then they subtracted, but they made a subtraction mistake, and then D would be the correct answer. So you see that the SOLs even put A and B, which is if they totaled it, they will put the good bad answer, if you will, as one of the subtract your answers as one of the A or B, because they might find the 135 and the 257 and clue on that. So that's why it's important that they're interpreting the word problem correctly and doing all parts of the set. This is a problem, very similar problem to the pizza one. The major difference between this is an estimation problem. And the thing that makes this an estimation problem is that it says closest to. Closest to, about, approximate, anything along that lines. It's going to clue them in that they're going to estimate, or their answer doesn't need to be fully exact by the end. In this one, it does say exactly, so they do need an exact. That one says closest to. So it says based on the table, which is closest to the difference between the total number of miles that the family traveled on day 1 and day 2 combined with the number of miles traveled on day 3. So there's a whole lot of math words thrown in there that they need to pick up on all of them to get this problem answered successfully. Difference is one of them, because that means subtract. Combined is another one, because that means they're going to have to add days 1 and 2. Closest to is another one, like I just said. And then on day number 3, so they know that they're going to have to combine 1 and 2 and get that sum and check that sum. Then they're going to have to estimate days 1 and 2 sum with day 3, and then check that whole process. So that one problem becomes, it could become overwhelming. I'll be honest, it does seem a little overwhelming, but when you really break it down, kind of pull out the keywords, it's a little bit more manageable, because they can, highlight 1 and 2 and then write that. Take it step by step by step. I always, as adults, we kind of know that if you look at a task and see, oh my goodness, I have all this ahead of me. Like I'm just, during summer school, I'm going to be starting on my graduate project, like my research project, and I was talking to my my mentor, and I said to her, "What exactly do I need to do this?" She's like, "Oh, well, it's not that hard. You have like 7 different things you have to do." Da, 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 da. I was like, "All right, what's step 1? Let's just start there." And step 1 is just write up my proposal, which is manageable. I have my proposal written up, so I just need to tweak it a little bit. So if I looked at that overall, that I have 7 things that I need to accomplish before school year begins, that's a little bit overwhelming. But if I look at it one step at a time, and then when I was looking at it, the second task I have to do is just get informed consent from the administrator of summer school. So that's literally will take me driving to the building, getting her to sign it, and then scanning it and faxing it to my school. So it does seem like a lot. I saw some of your eyes got really big when I was saying how much stuff they would have to do. But if they kind of break it down step by step by step, it's really not that difficult. But I will talk on the next slide a little bit more about word problems. So common mistakes with adding, subtracting, or estimating is not lining up the place values correctly when they're, if it's presented horizontally and they have to put it vertically to actually do it, not lining that up. Addition and subtraction mistakes, not putting a larger number on top in subtraction, or subtracting across zeros. Are you still alive? As long as you're still alive. All right, not checking, that's going to be a huge mistake, because if they don't check, they won't know if they're right or wrong. And not interpreting word problems correctly, that's not just for addition, subtraction, that's with multiplication, for really anything. Trying to decode what the test makers are actually asking you. So ways to practice this, I guess on the next slide is when I'll talk about word problems. Ways to practice is going to be B, C, and F. I really, really want all of your students to focus on F4, because that is going to be, that one is called multi-step word problems. So you can bet that's going to be a really good one for them to practice. I don't know, and that is F. The Fs are, I think Fs in general are, I think it's called mixed review. I don't remember if it's mixed review with word problems. There are word problems involved in it, but that's going to mix addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So they are going to really have to work through those word problems to see, am I adding, am I subtracting, am I multiplying, or dividing it? So they need to think overall big picture of that. So F4 is going to be a really, really, really good one to practice word problems.
How long do you think they should practice on that for?
That one specifically, I can't give a base amount, because it's about how much what your child needs. If they get on there and they're really, really good for, I would say put them on for like 20 minutes one time, see how they do, and then you can kind of gauge from there. Because I have 22 students and they're all at 22 different levels, so I can't really give a base, like that's how much they need to work on it. I would like to be seeing that every student, I'll get to that when I get to that letter. Poker chips, these are not using the same poker chips as the decimals and the fractions ones. This would be another set. You could even just use the same number tiles as that you'd be using for your egg cartons. You just give them a bunch of different numbers and give them 2 or 3 to add or subtract. Pretty straightforward. They would just a little bit far away. To practice estimation, when you're at the store, have the student estimate each item. So if it's like $29, I don't know what at the grocery store is $29. But be like, well, what's that close to? 30. Have them keep a running tally, and then give them how much you'll give, and have them figure out kind of ballpark. So you can go to work in estimation, addition, subtraction, decimals, all sorts of stuff. The store's a wonderful place. I did have a word problem slide in there somewhere. Oh, there it is. All right, word problem slide. 2 different types of word problems that they're going to encounter. It's going to be the single step problem, where it's just going to be one computation. It's going to be easy. Well, technically 2 computations with the checking, but one base computation. Multi-step, which is going to be what they see most on the SOL, is going to be multiple computations in a problem. So basically, that's going to be either they have to add 2 things, they have to add something and then add something again, or they could just add 3 digits at the same time. Subtract something and then subtract it again, or add and subtract, then add, or multiply, then multiply, and I don't think they're really going to get into divide and then multiply, but multi-step problems. So addition clue words are going to be summed together in total, increased, anything that's indicating that they're getting more of. Subtraction clue words are going to be difference, less, more than, taller, shorter, decreased, 8 spent. Basically something that is going away, or there's a difference in height, difference in income, something like that. Multiplication are, and then since multiplication is just an advanced form of addition and division is just an advanced form of subtraction, the clue words kind of can work a little bit for those. So it's about, so if it says like, John did 12 jumping jacks at 6, and then he did 3 more at 9. That's an adding because they're just doing that. But if it says like, John did 25 jumping jacks 3 times a day, that would be a multiplication. It's about really interpreting what they're asking for, and that F4 is going to really help with that. All right, so this is the end, on time mostly. So thank you for coming. This is kind of our last normal night. I'll kind of outline a couple things for the upcoming month. Make sure you're using this stuff with your students. Like I said, this is what we started with, so it wouldn't be a bad idea to start reviewing this stuff because we don't spend a whole lot of time on reviewing whole number place value because that's kind of just a review skill from 3rd grade. I spend a lot of time reviewing, the major concepts: decimals, fractions, multiplication, division. Long division. So those are like the 4 big major skills I would say in 4th grade. So I spend a lot of time reviewing that. Occasionally on IXL for the week, I'll just say like jump on, something like the B or the C, just kind of a lighter week. But it's really going to be good to review those. F4 is going to be really very helpful. Couple of things that just went home this evening. I'll go over this last. The RSVP form for the May homeschool connection night went home tonight. I also sent out the link on Class Messenger. I'd love to have all 22 parents here because these are going to be very crucial nights to attend. So clear your calendar. The first one, May 5th, is going to be kind of up to you guys what you want me to review. So if you do this on paper, it looks like this. If you do it online, it'll look like this, but an online version. You get to pick 5 topics, or I asked for 5. Some people have been choosing more than 5. I'll just take the 4 to 5 topics that have been asked for most to review those. It's not going to be as in depth as the night when I can spend an hour on one thing. I'll kind of briefly review, do some modeled examples, and so then you can always revisit those. The Virginia Studies Homeschool Connection Night, which is going to be an hour and a half long, since I've condensed a lot of stuff into a short amount of time. It's going to be Tuesday, May 12th, which our Virginia Studies SOL is on the 18th, I think. So that'll give you the knowledge for what you need to help review, pretty intensively for that next week. And then you can also have all the different resources. And then the very last one, which I'm very excited for, is the students versus parents one. That's where I would love to have all 22 students and parents here.
Show up then.
Well, there's no option for my kid is coming, but I'm not. If we see that, I didn't put that as an option. So that went home. Please fill that out as soon as possible. You're probably good at Class Messenger like every other day, saying fill this out, fill this out, fill this out. Because especially for that last one, I do need to really plan, like set up the room for the right thing. I'm in the planning stages of how exactly that's going to work. The other paper that went home tonight is this paper. If it got destroyed in the travels between here and school, or between here and home, there is also a digital version on my website. This is going to be basically a really good way for you to keep your child accountable of what they should be doing between now and for the next month. So I broke it down. I put the SOL dates. As far as I know, they have been finalized, but might change. I'll let you know if they do. Hopefully they don't. So for Virginia Studies, which is on the 18th, a couple of really good ways to review for that. Obviously, that study guide that I sent home, that 8-page packet. I have, if you go over, review 1 page a night, and I don't mean like the double-sided page. I mean like they should be on page.
Great.
It's embarrassing. Yeah, they should be on. I don't even. Yeah, I think they were supposed to do 4 last night, so the 5 was supposed to be tonight.
Can I ask real quick,
Yeah.
are you picking questions that pertain to the night before only? And the reason why I ask is because she's rushing and she's trying to get it all in, all 8 pages in one night. And
For right now, I'm picking the day that they should have studied them. So like this morning, they should have studied, so last night they were supposed to study page 4.
okay,
So this morning I asked questions from page 4.
that's what I thought.
And then, but by the end of this week, they should
Yeah,
have
it's fine.
reviewed the whole
Okay.
packet. So then next week, the whole packet's ready.
Because someday she was trying to do all of it.
No, she was only supposed to do 1, 2, and 3 over the weekend.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think my son did anything over the weekend.
Well, then he must have remembered some stuff because I've only had 2 students have not been able to, or 2 students per day haven't been able to answer their question in the morning. And I told them, like, some days I might ask questions, some days I might not. So other good ways to practice that. I have Jeopardy on my website for every single chapter. That's under forms, it's just called Jeopardy links. I also uploaded flashcards, a digital version of flashcards. It has every single chapter. You can watch them. It's made with the same program that I did the Polygon Pizza thing with. So they can do it online, or the other really nice thing is you can print that off. I'm personally not printing that off because that's a lot of paper and we're on paper. It's on my website. If you go to forms and then you scroll all the way down to Virginia Studies, you want to look for, I think it's just called Virginia Studies flashcards, and it'll take you to a website that will have it broken down by chapter. I think there are in total, I think there's I know it says on my account there's 1,000 flashcards, but I don't know if that's just for Virginia Studies because I have other flashcards that I made. But that was, if they're practicing that, which could almost kind of replace the study guide thing, that's going to be a really good resource. And the other thing on my YouTube channel, for everything from, I think, American Revolution to, chapters 5 all the way till the end, I have YouTube playlists of different things that we did. So those are also going to be good resources to watch. So I have videos about Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, James Madison, all those, and they're quick. They're a couple minutes, 5 minutes of each, just cool, quick refresher. If they have 5 minutes downtime before dinner, just have them get on and watch those. They've watched most of them on there already. Virginia Studies, I really do feel that every student in the class can do very, very well. I shouldn't do just Virginia Studies. I do believe that everybody in the class can do very, very well on all 3 SWLs as long as they're preparing in school and at home. If they're not preparing in school at home, they're not going to do well. It's the simple truth. And but Virginia Studies, that's going to be an SWL that they're either going to know it or they're not going to do it. I was talking with Gracie the other day that with math and with reading, you can kind of fake it until you make it. Maybe you can't figure out a question here, but by the end you can go back. Virginia Studies, not so much. It's either you know it or you don't know it. For reading and math, I had students last year would take the whole day to do it. For Virginia Studies, I had kids done in an hour, which is a reasonable time frame because if you know it, you're going to be done quick. If you don't know, it doesn't matter how long you're struggling with it. You can't make knowledge out of nothing. So all those different resources are going to be very helpful. For reading as well, the absolute best way to prepare them. What do you think is the best way to prepare your child for the reading as well? Yes, read every single night. Either with them, read independently, listen to an audiobook. They need to be reading minimum 20 minutes every single night. I also listed a link. It's mrnussbaum.com that has a lot of good reading comprehension activities on there. It's mrnussbaum.com, links on here. And then you go 4th grade language arts, online reading comprehension. And then it's the paper that it's not on that paper. It's on paper that went home, and there's also a version on my website. Another good, really, and also for Virginia Studies, that homeschool connection night is going to be very, very crucial to attend that. And I have the wrong date on this, so go off of whatever it says online. So I had to change the dates 12 times. Homeschool connection night for reading. I went back and I reorganized all of them, all the homeschool connection nights on YouTube. So it doesn't just say reading homeschool connection night, it says radio homeschool connection night, and then whatever the topic was, and I put it all into a playlist for you guys. So it's all organized for you. Now for math, if you see math, I was very extensive on how to prepare them. I literally sat down on IXL and I typed out each letter for what it is, what's going to be helpful. So for decimals, I wrote down which IXL numbers it is. IXL, while it is great, there is stuff on IXL that they don't need to practice, and there's, but I don't think there was really anything on IXL. There's nothing that they need to practice that's not on IXL, if that makes sense. Also, I did the same thing with the math homeschool connection nights. I went back and I retitled them. So like tonight's is going to be called Math Homeschool Connection Night Whole Numbers. 2 weeks ago it was called Math Homeschool Connection Night Decimals. So whatever your student's struggling with, you can go back and watch that. It'll have the whole presentation. It'll have the model examples. With the exception of one of the fractions ones, it has the audio of me talking through it too. I think it's the one about adding, subtracting fractions. The audio. The audio cut out for most of it, but there is still, you know, you see me doing the work on it, and I'm more than happy to record another video of me walking through it. And all the homeschool connection nights, those are going to be a really good resource because if you know you've forgotten how to do something, your students have forgotten to do something, there's always the homeschool connection nights that you can listen to what I've talked through and give them examples to relate to. But so this paper went home tonight. If you haven't seen it, it is also on my website, just under forms. And yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. But this paper, I would either find your student's copy of this and put it on the fridge, or print out a copy of it and put it on the fridge, because this is going to be a very, very helpful resource. It's going to tell you exactly how to prepare your student, other than coming in and taking the test with them. And also around as well as I will send home a note that you guys will write in thank you note, or not thank you notes, good luck notes to them. Thank you notes to me, and then you'll write good luck notes to them. But that'll come home in a couple weeks. So, do we have any questions?
How do you call these cross
Cross multiplying? Yep. Or butterfly method is what they know it as.